very beneficial. So we won't muck around, we'll sort of get into the content. I guess one of the main things I wanted to do, for those who don't know me, I'm Darren Laddie, so I'm the principal of the office here in Penrith, and we're now in Glenmore Park and Blue Mountains. When we first sort of sat down a couple of years ago just reviewing property management, because we felt that it hadn't got enough attention in the past and things have been done the same way for a long time, so Beck and I sat down and said that we want to come up with a strategy to offer more value as an agent, and we talked about different ways that we could do that. So we want to sort of walk you through that tonight and just let you know some of the opportunities that you've got by working with us. The market itself obviously goes through a lot of changes, probably more so now than in the past. There's information available all the time which impacts on how the real estate market transacts. Looking forward at the moment, obviously the next big thing is going to be what they do with interest rates. So I've been in real estate for a very long time, I'll leave it at that. I can't believe that the market can go up in value when they have 13 interest rate rises. Like, that's just not how the market's supposed to react to interest rate rises. And it's all due purely to undersupply. There's a huge undersupply. We've had a very fast growing population and we just can't keep up with the housing needs of those people. So we've seen rents increase, we've seen house prices increase at a time when they shouldn't. So with interest rates, the meeting's on the 20th next week, so the most likely, or the market's factoring in an increased fall. I think ANZ's already dropped their rate in anticipation. So it's going to be interesting to see what that does to the market. So if the prices go up with interest rates going up, what are they going to do if interest rates go down? So it'll be interesting to follow. Obviously Penrith's gone through a lot of changes. I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about that after Lucas does his bit. So please make sure you get a drink, have a feed. We'll run through Lucas's presentation, then we'll do a Q&A so you guys can ask any questions you might have about what he's talking about. The changes are fairly dramatic, so it's probably worth making sure that you understand them, and we can certainly talk you through it. And then after that, I'll come back and have a bit of a chat to you about some of the opportunities out there and tell you a couple of stories about what we've been able to offer our clients. You'll notice that the girls have got the new fact sheet that's hot off the press today. So our research team up in Brisbane, they put that out every 6 months, so they do like intense research on what the market's doing in Penrith. Next week we'll have the Blue Mountains one, and then we'll have the Glenmore Park one after that. So you can just reach out to your property manager anytime and they'll make sure you got a copy of it. The other document next to it is the economic report. So ASTI's been doing that economic report since I first joined nationwide, so it's been a long time. It's got some really good, interesting data. It talks about what interest rates are expected to do, gives you a real insight into what the market's doing, talks about the building approvals and all sorts of things. It's not necessarily the lightest read, so if you have a look through it and you've got some questions, just throw me an email anytime, chat with your property manager, test them out, make sure they know it as well. I think a lot of people don't know that the PRD actually stands for Property Research Development. So our business is built around understanding property, and we've built that all on the back of research. So we do a lot of research before we move into any market to understand what's happening in the market. So that's probably enough from me for now. I'll pass you on to Lucas. He can regale you with all the new legalities and then come back for the Q&A straight after.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. Hello guys, by way of introduction, my name's Lucas. I'm actually one of the industry trainers that I do for New South Wales. So part of my job is to make sure all the agents are up to date with these new laws that have come in. No doubt you guys have already heard them, you've got an interest in them, and we want to cover some of the main points here today. So big thank you to PRD for certainly inviting me, but more importantly to have a team that is supporting you guys, and certainly putting this on your behalf is not something every agency does, and let me tell you, I speak firsthand for that. So that's one thing, it's certainly a credit to them, and that's going to be our goal today, to tackle these new laws. There are certainly some mixed feelings about these new laws. I think it's fair to say, no doubt you might have your own opinions and you've got your own questions, which we'll get to as we go through. But I also think it's important that if we were to fast forward our time into 12 months, I honestly think these new laws are just going to become part of business. if you think back to those of us who are old enough certainly to remember when GST was put on, that was going to be the end of the world. You know, when that was going to be first introduced. Now no one thinks about it or says it anymore. And this is on a far less scale than that. So certainly there are some downsides to sort of what's come in, but certainly I don't think they're as bad as perhaps what is being portrayed out there. You know, one of the biggest questions that I get around the new laws as a landlord is by asking that one question, which is, what about selling my investment? Because there are some new restrictions on how we can sell it. So when you do sell a property, there are kind of two ways that you will do it. You're either going to have the property sold, or you're going to have what they call a proposed sale. So the sale of the property, the first one here, has and will always be the same. It's what it is now, and when the new laws come in on Monday, they'll always be the same, okay? You can sell your home and give the tenant 30 days notice to leave, assuming they're on a periodic lease, meaning they're not on a fixed term, okay? That has been no different, okay? That's obviously if you're selling it with a tenant and the new owner wants to have what they call vacant possession. They want the property vacant so they can move in or do what they will, okay? Nothing's changed on that front. What has changed is if you decide that you want to put the property on the market, you want to say, hey, we want to terminate the lease because we want to propose sale of the property, okay? That is where we have to give these extra notice periods, okay? If they're in a lease of 6 months or less, we've got to give 60 days notice. And if they're on a fixed term or a periodic, we've got to give 90 days notice, okay? Now, one thing I will say to that is that you can always sell your property with the tenant in there. There's no restriction on that. So if you needed to, for any particular reason, you could always sell the property tenanted. And obviously there might be investors out there who prefer that, don't they? Because they'll have income coming in straight away off the bat. So it doesn't tie all of the hands behind your back that some may believe, or some may make you believe, if that makes sense. And they really start talking a lot about what they call these exclusion periods. Okay, you guys might have heard this word before, which means if we did sell the property, okay, or we did try to terminate the lease because we want to plan to sell the property, we've got to give these notice periods. And say we put the property on the market, we then have an exclusion period of 6 months, which means we're not allowed to re-let the property in a 6-month period, unless the government, by way of New South Wales Fair Trading, they're our regulator, we write to them and they give us an exemption. So there is a chance for that too, if need be. However, some people say, well, I wouldn't be able to sell my property, and then even if I do, I exclude it for 6 months. I say, well, that's only if you wanted to sell it vacant. Okay, if you wanted to sell it with a tenant in there, none of that will really matter. You know, so you've always got that flexibility there if you want to, okay? Then we turn to some of the other changes around the other reasons that we can or can't terminate a lease, okay? So the ones that we have now is we've always got breach of the agreement or non-payment of rent. The two of the big ones that are now going is that we can't terminate at the end of a fixed term or what they call no grounds, okay? Just to be clear, if we have a year lease, from now until the end of the fixed term just meant we could terminate at the end of the lease. We're not able to do that anymore, okay? If they're in a periodic, which means a month-by-month lease, we used to be given them 90 days anytime we wanted to and we could terminate the lease. They're the two things that are now not there. In their place, they've given us other reasons that we can terminate, okay? If there's significant renovations, if there's we're going to plan to demolish the property, if the landlord or our landlord family moves in, or if we're not going to use that property as a residential property anymore, they do come with exclusion periods, as you can see here, okay? So if you're doing it for a particular reason, but these are obviously the ways in which you can terminate the leases if you wanted the extra ways that you can do it. It's just the no ground and the end of the fixed term are the two that are not going to be on the list anymore, okay? The other big factor, so really around ending a tenancy has been one thing, the other is pets, okay? Pets is the bigger problem, okay? Basically, the tenants are going to be allowed to apply for a pet anytime they want. New South Wales Fair Trading are going to have a form that they can apply, and we have to get back to them within 21 days as to whether we approve, okay, or disapprove. If we do want to not approve a pet, okay, there are certain reasons in these new laws that we can say that. We can say, well, there's an unreasonable number of pets. Now, we were a bit unsure as to what that number was going to be up until about 3 or 4 weeks ago when the regulations came out. That number is now 4. Okay, so 4, anything over 4 becomes unreasonable. And I know I don't agree with it either. When I read it, you could have pushed me over with a feather. But that is the only repercussion. And obviously there's a difference because in my opinion, I'm sure you share the same, it'd be different if someone wanted to apply with 4 goldfish as opposed to maybe 4 other animals. You know, there might be, you could technically, if they apply for 5, you could say no, 5 goldfish. But whether you want to or not, that's up to you, okay? I'll leave that to your discretion. You could say that the property perhaps is unsuitable, maybe around the fencing and things of that nature. You could say that the damage the pet is likely to cause is going to be greater than the bond. You could also say the easy one is that the landlords reside in the property. So if you've got a granny flat, it makes it nice and black and white for us that we could say no, but that would only apply in those certain instances. The other thing that's really big is around a bylaw, or more importantly, a council order. So if there's something in the council that perhaps prohibits that particular pet from residing in that property, then we can instantly say no as well. Now I come to you with information, but not all the solutions. Because when people say, is what's going to make the property unsuitable, or is the damage going to be likely greater than the bond, they're written in the law right now. The only way we'll have absolute clarity is until these new laws come in and someone in New South Wales goes to tribunal to know, okay, well, how did they prove that the damage was going to be greater than the bond? Does that make sense? So we don't have all the answers right now, but we only have what they've given us so far, okay? Apart from refusing, if you didn't have a reasonable ground to refuse, you can put conditions on them. So you can say, yeah, you can have that dog in there. You can bring that dog into the property. However, at the end of the lease, we might ask you to have those carpets professionally cleaned. Okay. We also might say, we might ask you to have the property fumigated too. Okay, so we can put conditions on them. They're written in the law, they're fine. This is a bit of an interesting one. They say if it's an outside animal and it's not unreasonable, we can ask the animal to be kept outside. Now, animals and pets aren't defined in there yet. So some of us in this room might be thinking, well, if we've got a house, we could ask the dog to be kept outside. Maybe. I don't know if that law is written to be more meant for animals, like for rural properties, like if you've got a calf or a goat or something. We don't know that yet. They haven't defined what an animal is. So I don't want to come to you tonight and say, yeah, definitely you could say the dog or the cat has to be kept outside, because we've got to wait for that to become through the tribunal. However, that is a condition that we could put on a pet application when it comes in.
Did they say anything about the size of the property, like 4 animals, whether it's a unit or a house?
That was one of the things that really surprised me, to be honest with you. The laws came out actually last year, okay? And not to get too technical, but the regulations only came out about a month ago. So we knew the section that said, hey, we can't have an unreasonable number of pets. We knew that was coming in for quite some time. We're thinking, geez, that's going to be really hard to define, because if you've got a 1-bedroom apartment versus a 4-bedroom house, how do you come up with one set of standards that they get? And they did. They said 4, and they didn't say in respect to what property it is. And that was a bit of a shock to us as well. That's one of the bigger takeaways from today. We can't unfortunately change.
What if they take up the lease and they've got a dog,
Yep.
right? And then 6 months down the track, and they've something up, and a cat's appeared.
Yep.
Next minute, snakes appeared in the menagerie and things like that, which you knew nothing about.
Yeah, that's still a breach of the lease.
That is.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're talking about terminations. That's still a breach of the agreement,
Yeah.
because they're still obligated to tell us and apply.
Yeah.
Okay. Same with anything subleasing to another tenant. All of those are breaches. That they need to get the application and the approval for that to happen. Okay. So we should be aware.
So that after they've taken the lease up, they have to apply if they want to bring other animals in.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Because you've got to get approval
You
for
can't
each
refuse.
animal. Well, there are grounds to refuse, but yeah, you have to follow one of those grounds, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, I will say one other thing, because these laws, when I talk about it, and we certainly talk about it with an agency, we can speak for an hour or sometimes 2 when I do some of these sessions with an agency, because there's a lot more to them than what we're talking about here, okay? And what I mean by that is when you actually terminate a lease, there are certain documents you've got to give or not give. There's all these little intricacies in there that are, certainly you've got to provide a way for the tenant to pay for their rent in a free manner, okay? When they sign a lease, there's certain things they can't pay for. Rental increases have only got to be once every 12 months. There's a lot on there, okay? But being with such a great team here, you guys are going to have property managers who are going to basically take this matter off your hands, okay? So I won't delve in them too much. If you've got questions on them, I'm happy to answer them if there's something specifically that you have. But more importantly, I think it's important that we focus on the big 2 ticket items, terminating a lease and pets. They were the big 2 items. And as I said, I really do think, although it seems, and we're shaking our heads here today, and I'm with you, can I say that? When I saw it, I'm shaking my heads too, but I think give it 12 months and it will just be a part of being business. And I personally don't see it as being too prohibitive. I just think it's a little more frustration than anything at this point, because it was a political matter that has now become basically the law, okay? So, got any questions, make sure you write them down. I'll come back, certainly answer anything that you have on any topic that you have, but I'll pass it back to Darren so he can talk to you about obviously the next steps.
Thank you. So does anyone have any other questions around that first before we move on?
You just touched on, what if it's already written in the bylaws? How many animals you can have, what type?
Yeah, strata's difficult because the Strata Schemes Act only recently changed last year and made it a little harder for strata schemes to unreasonably refuse a pet. So I wouldn't, even the bylaws that you might be familiar with now, that say they've got to be of a certain size and weight, can actually go against the new act. So I wouldn't rely heavily on bylaws. They're not going to be as fruitful as what council orders will be. Council orders are going to be much more significant in terms of being able to refuse a pet.
Overpowering.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation now where they've brought a pet into the property, and then now they've applied after bringing the pet in. So where do we stand there?
Say that situation again.
They've brought the pet to the property,
Yep.
and then applied afterwards.
That's still a breach.
That's a breach.
Okay, they have to apply. I'm assuming they're either going to apply when they're giving an application and moving in, that's the one time they can apply, or at any time during the lease, they put the application fee and then we've got 21 days to respond. Okay, if they work out any ways outside of those 2 matters, that's where they're not following the conditions of the lease. They can't just do it off their own back.
And what about like quality of life around that? Like what about if the dog's a pest, for example, and you live next door? How does that, is there any, is that a council-based thing? Is that a...
Can be. So again, in the lease, one of the conditions around breaching a lease is all about peace, comfort and privacy of neighbours. Okay, that's always been a condition in the lease. It doesn't even apply to animals necessarily. I don't know if you know, some kids can be a little bit rambunctious too. Okay, yeah. So that's always, so if there is cause for neighbours to concern, that could be an avenue that you take on and saying that there is a breach of the lease. It's a little difficult because you do need to rely on reports of neighbours, and sometimes police reports can be a little bit of extra work, but that is an avenue of maybe a potential possibility.
Yeah. And so say there's a breach of lease and it has to go to tribunal, like what's the time frame typically around that?
Well, and I think property managers are going to share with me the frustration is that it's already difficult right now, and I'm going to anticipate, given these new laws, that there's going to be certainly an extra number of hearings that are going to need to be had. So that's my one concern for this, is I'm hoping that the government, I'll say one thing, Victoria have just gone through this last year, and out of that, their VCAT, which is the tribunal, did suffer a little bit of a backlog. New South Wales are familiar with that now, and we're hoping that they have gotten ready for this and are going to put extra resources in. We don't know that, we'll wait and see, but timing for it is going to be the one thing that's going to be the problem.
Sure they would.
When you say a tenant leaves and they've had a dog and stuff like that, and they have the place fumigated, what do you classify as fumigated? Is that from a registered firm, or is that just someone going to Bunnings buying a couple of cans of lead bombs and let them off?
Yeah, no, anytime you do these things, certainly from a risk management point of view, if you want to do it for someone professional, where you've got documentation to show that it was all legitimate, obviously, because you don't want them coming back saying it wasn't done in the right manner or anything like that. So I'd be, as all the managers would do, be getting quotes, work orders, and having them done in the right avenue.
Yeah.
And that'd be likewise for carpet as well, not this DIY hire from Bunnings cleaning job.
My recommendation would be, yeah. And keep in mind, because you're having it written into the condition of the lease, you know, it's certainly the cost of it, providing 3 quotes to show that we're not going exorbitant, we're just picking someone reasonable at their cost as well. So, you know, instead of doing it yourself, you'd rather have someone professionally done, particularly if that was a condition of their approval.
So Beck, we'd be looking at the conditions in the leases now, if they've got to be adapted to these new laws?
Yeah, the
What are you
new,
doing all the way down the back there? Shouldn't you be coming up the front to answer questions? I'll be dragging you up soon anyway, so.
So that was my next question, Mary, sorry.
If I have a tenant where they requested to have a dog, they made it clear that the dog was an outside dog. There's a contained yard and an outside area for it to sleep and everything,
Yep.
undercover. And then on the inspection, we find out that the dog is actually inside and has caused an enormous amount of damage by trying to scratch to get out of the front door.
Yep.
What's the situation there? Is that a breach?
Yeah, well,
Yes, sir.
no, well, first and foremost, the keeping it on the outside is going to be a new provision from Monday onwards. Okay,
Mhm.
so presumably, I'm guessing in your situation, did you write that into the lease
Yes, that it was an outdoor, yes.
that it was outside and to be
Yes.
kept outside? So in that instance, your special condition you put in the lease becomes really crucial in the wording. Okay, whereas moving from May onwards, because it's been written in the law, it makes it a little bit more clearer, if that makes sense. However, the same rules will still apply, okay? If it's written in there clearly and it's stated in there and then you have evidence of that not being followed, that because you head down the avenue of a breach of the lease, potentially.
Which the evidence is the damage, right?
They don't, but however, I kind of circle back to what I said before in this new law is that they haven't defined what a pet is yet. So for us to be able to say that it's reasonable to keep them outside, I'm not sure whether a dog is going to fit that bill yet or not. Does that make sense? They might be writing it for other animals to be kept outside. Again, that's what we're just unclear on.
But isn't it the case, regardless of who has done the damage, whether it's a pet or a person, is there any landlord on then the right to claim that, hey, this is the prior picture, like, you know,
Oh, yes,
on
of
and
course,
off
sorry,
it?
but I thought were you talking about terminating their lease?
Yes.
Sorry, yes, that's right, at the end of the lease, definitely, we were just talking about
Oh,
breaching the lease
terminating,
during, yes.
Yeah. So it makes obviously the inspections or the ingoing, outgoing inspections more important to make sure it's right. So that's one of the value adds that we've put in place is we've got a new system now for doing the ingoings and outgoings annual routine inspections. So it's more of a digital way of doing it. So it's made the girls' jobs easier because it's more detailed, but it also means that we've got a better record of things, so which can be kept in file. So like there's some advantages to the way technology goes, just in being able to store information, but we've got to be more diligent with it now. So it's more important than ever that you've got an experienced team that. One of the reasons we invited you all here is because we've obviously been learning about the new laws as well. So our job is to make sure we've got our ducks in a row so we can manage your property with the new laws in place. And it's like anytime there's a change or a new law comes out, it's a little bit scary at first because you can see all these scenarios where it could be detrimental. But as Lucas said, it's got to get tested as well. So at some point we'll understand exactly what it means better. But unfortunately, there's that period where you don't. So yeah. So I think when we first started, we've gone, oh my goodness, why'd you buy a rental property? But then when you break it all down, you've got to remember, the majority of tenants are good. Like we don't have that many problems. Like how many times we've been to tribunal in the last 12 months being like, like a handful. And we've got over 600 properties. So it is quite rare. And we monitor every single week, every Thursday, we check on where the arrears are sitting. So the girls are actually very competitive, probably more competitive than the sales guys I've come to learn. So they're like making sure that that everything's how it should be. So arrears, not only just for the rents, but for all the invoices and everything as well. So we literally sit there every Thursday, go through it, make sure that everything's up to date. And I mean, some of the girls have had 0 to 1% arrears, which is just unheard of because the system picks up if someone hasn't paid for a day just because of their pay cycle. So it's really good to see that they've been on that. And remembering we've been through really difficult financial times, it has been a really tough few years for people in general. So to have that, so well represented is great. So I'm very proud of them for that. So the rent increases, that's obviously a change as well because the market can change a lot in 12 months. I was talking to some of the guys before about the unit price. So we've got a new block settling on Friday, it's Solace, which is across the road from East Side Quarter. Like the rents are $100 a week more in Solace than what they are in ESQ, which is surprising, but that's what the market wanted to pay. So that then, you know, it's a change in the market by those prices being achieved. So monitoring the market's really important.
I do have an issue with that because several of my properties are long-term leases, and so the once a month or once a year, increase. I find that the ones where there's a quick turnover where we can increase the rent, that they're falling behind, and because they're owned by super fund, I have to provide information to say that yes, these properties are being rented out at market value, and they're not. They're falling behind. How do you fix that? Short of terminating.
Look, you're right in a way. Like it's a balance, really, the way I look at it. So if you have a lot more turnover, you definitely can push the prices up more because you're re-establishing the market value every time someone vacates. But you have more wear and tear on the property with people moving in and out. You run the risk of having someone in there who's not going to be as reliable as the person you had. So there is a balance there. Like you'd be really surprised how many of our landlords actually say, no, we don't want to put the rent up because they really like the tenant and the tenant's been good to them. So it is a balance. And I think that's a good conversation with your property manager just to weigh up the risks. So there's always a risk. When you've got vacant, there's always a risk. The risk of it staying vacant at the moment is very low because the vacancy rate's so low. But the risk of getting a bad tenant is, you know, a real risk. So, but again, our selection process is really tight. So we check very carefully who we're putting into a property first because it just creates problems for everyone if you get it wrong. But I would weigh up the risks and the rewards of any situation, especially in real estate, because you're getting capital growth there typically as well, which we've seen very good capital growth in the last few years. So, and I expect you're going to see more moving forward in the next year or two. Is that no more questions?
Just one. I was just touching on the other rules. I'm assuming like all your lease agreements will change. You guys will be all over that, changing all the agreements.
So so we work with Lucas on all those things. So we go to him for advice to make sure we understand it properly. We'll work out exactly how far we can push it with what we can put into the conditions, for example, and then we'll implement them as soon as we can. So, and we'll keep our eye if it changes as well.
So I think more that everyone's at the same agreement. The most important thing to most people is that situation.
100%. And a large percentage of you guys have always said to us we don't want any pets, and we've had the right to say that, which I understand why we don't now, but that's just the way it is. So, and pets can do a lot of damage, you know, can't they? Tom and Liv are going through a dash-hound issue at the moment. So, but it should be something that you can decide, but unfortunately, they've changed that, and we've got to work around it. So,
Why did they change it? What was their reason?
I never discuss politics or anything, so I won't. But it is, I think it's because renting got so hard. Like you also on the media, the lines of people lining up for properties, like it was ridiculous. And again, it goes back to that housing shortage we spoke about at the start. So I think they just started to look to ways to make it more beneficial for the tenants because they're trying to find that balance all the time, and they've just swayed it way too far towards the tenants. In my opinion, like you should be able to take back possession of your property if you want to take it back, but you can't now. So you've got to have the valid reasons. So you've just got to be smarter. You've got to plan it, and you need to speak to your property manager if your plans are changing. So then we can give you advice on how to adapt to it. So, and like you saw, there's not so much loopholes, but there's checks and balances in all the things they've put in place. So we'll make sure we're well educated on it so we can help you guys with it as well. But yeah, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with the two main items, and obviously it's always going to, you know, be hard to process sometimes. You can't understand the logic of it, but that's what we've got to work with, I guess, is the best way to put it. So yeah. So is that it for questions?
I have a question for Lucas. So with the exclusion period, it's tied to the property. With the rent increase, say if your tenant leaves, is that tied to the property as well, or you can increase it multiple times if you have multiple tenants leave within that 12-month period?
Yeah, okay, so just to be clear, you've got different tenants for the same
Yeah,
property?
so say you sign a lease, the tenant leaves, you increase it for the next time you leave, they leave again. Can you increase the rent one time?
No,
for that
it's
property?
one time for the same lease.
Yeah, okay.
And the same lease counts if you've got the same landlord, at least one tenant is the same. So you might have two, and then one leaves and someone comes in, it's still the same lease. And then that tenant immediately occupies the property before and after the end of the time. So that, all those things have to count as the one lease for it to mean we can only increase the rent once a year,
Okay.
once every 12 months.
You mentioned Victoria did it 12 months ago, New South Wales doing now.
Yep.
What about Queensland?
Queensland are always behind.
Right.
Even in the origin.
Queensland's all over it too, don't worry.
Yeah, they're coming.
Yeah, yeah.
It's becoming.
So similar thing?
They're very exactly the same.
Just got a letter this week.
Yeah.
Why don't they just make it a bloody national thing so that it's not, you can just,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But okay, so basically same thing, similar timing.
Well, I actually think the cat's been in there all along, but suddenly we just get the letter for approval, but there's a photo of the cat, so obviously the cat's been there all along. Home to us, but now suddenly we have to give permission for
Yeah.
it to live there, that it's obviously lived there the whole time.
Yeah, I think stories can get stretched a few times. We definitely
No, I
juggle
don't
it.
cat, that's why they.
Let's not go there.
That's fair. Very good. So I guess what I was wanting to finish on from our business point of view was just to talk about some of the other value add things that we can offer to you guys. Some of you probably are aware of it, but maybe not aware of the significance of it. So you probably know that a lot of our business is focused around the project sales, but what happens with the project sales before we launch them to the public is developers allow us to do like sometimes it's a VVIP, sometimes a VIP launch to our database before it gets launched to the public. And with all the developments we're working on at the moment, we were able to offer them at a discount from the actual list price. So normally the list price will be set, and then we can normally offer it like a 3% discount at the VIP launch. So all the apartments we've sold lately, like if you took Solace for example, we were talking about before, we launched that about 3 years ago. So the VIP launch was a certain price point. The buildings had 6 price increases since we launched it. So the people that responded to that initial VIP offering bought before there were 6 price increases. So they literally bought them, I think the 2 beds were around 600 or something at the start, and now we're selling for 840. ASQ's been the same, even back to Home on High was the same. It's strategy. So what the developers would need to do is they need to make a certain number of sales to trigger their finance to be able to start construction. So they'll have a certain figure they've got to hit. So they're normally prepared to sort of do a few deals to try and get to it. So we will send out to you guys whenever we launch a new project an invitation to come in and have a look at it. And if it's something you like, then there's a real value add there for you guys to be able to buy it like below where the market sits. I think even Glenmore Village probably, how many price increases do you reckon they've had their time?
That was the same, like, it's pretty similar timeline.
Probably like 6 or 7 or something. So in some cases it's a very significant amount. Doesn't always work. The market doesn't always go up. So but I think out of the last 5 or 6 we've done, like both my kids bought in early because it was a good way of getting into the market. So they bought 1 bed as first home buyers. And yeah, we've certainly done the same with our super as well. We put one in Aqua into our super, and touch wood, it hasn't been vacant since. And there's some real unique developments getting done like around the Penrith area now. So Glenmore Village was on top of the shopping centre, so 8,000 metres square in retail there in Mulgoa Rise part of Glenmore. It's actually more Mulgoa than Glenmore really, but yeah, I just wanted you guys to know, because we send it out like an EDM, but you guys get so many emails, it probably doesn't really carry any weight by us sending it out. So the only way I thought we could like get the message across is while we're all here, just so that you know that it is a genuine thing. So we actually normally have an actual price list that has the VIP price and the market price on it. Not that we give it out, but we always have that, so we know exactly how much the saving is compared to what it's going to be once we go to the public. So yeah. Like Preston Rise is one we've just been working on recently. Pearl's the next release. Come backwards and forwards.
Sorry.
You're making me confused now. So Eden's the one that's under construction now, Panthers. So next week we've got the topping out ceremony because the last slab's been poured on, or the roof's been poured on Eden. On the same day we're doing the soil turning ceremony for Pearl, which is stage 4. And that was always going to be the sort of the jewel in the crown for East Side Quarter because it's a 13-story one. But again there, like to give you a good example, we did the VIP launch on the Saturday. We made so many sales on the Saturday, we put the prices up by 10% for the Sunday and still sold the same number of properties we sold the day before. So even me personally as an investor, I've been looking for VIP opportunities even in other areas. But the main thing, the highest risk in doing that is definitely like know who the builder is. So, you know, making sure they've got DA approval before you buy. Like there was one recently where they didn't have that in Penrith and the building never went ahead. So make sure it's got DA approval, make sure the builder's good, all those things. And I guess the last thing, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you guys in here was just to show you how the office works. So what we've been able to do here is actually bring all the different divisions of our business under one roof. So we've got our project marketing team down the back, we've got our property management team in their cramped quarters, which are about to be extended for them very soon. We've got our commercial team out the front as well. So we can literally give you guys advice on every aspect of real estate all under one roof now, which was a goal of what we wanted the business to be able to do. So whatever your needs might be, just give someone in the office a yell, speak to your property manager. The cool thing here is they all talk to each other now because they all like talking. Real reason. I was going to say because we gave them good space for it, but they just seem to like talking. So that's basically it. So by all means, we've got plenty of drinks, plenty of food. So we'd really like everyone to hang around if you've got time and catch up. I am going to call the property management team up to the front just to make sure that you've met everyone. So Beck, you can come on up the front. You've been hiding down the back there. I just can't let them get away with that. So
Bring them all up.
I'm going to bring them all up, so you can call them all up.
One by one, too.
I don't know, because you've probably in a lot of cases spoken to your property manager on the phone but not necessarily met. So Rebecca's our head of PM, so she runs the team for us, and you can bring everyone up.
Madison. And probably Alicia as well. So Maddie and Alicia work together in a pod, so they do a lot of our development.
Yeah, so they work a lot of. So we tried to keep the one team working on the project stuff because it is a different process than managing a house, for example. So that's been a good thing, and they just love it, don't they?
They do.
Good
They
fun.
do love it.
They do love it. Keeps
Yep.
them busy.
Then we've got Brooklyn. So Brooklyn's recently, in the last 12 months, gone out on their own portfolio. So for those of you, this is Brooklyn. And then Jill. Jill's our mountain girl. She runs the mountain portfolio up in our Springwood office for us. And then Brody is our leasing consultant.
Brody doesn't know what hit him. He literally goes and find the agent.
He's
working
our
there
lucky
with the girls.
leasing consultant. And then we've got Lauren as well, but Lauren's holidaying
Fiji or
in
something?
Bali.
Bali,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
I
So
saw the
she's not
photos on
made it.
Facebook,
Yeah.
so she looks like she's having a horrible time.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah, this is it. This is the team.
And how, like in general, roads like the rentals, how many people are you seeing at most opens and that nowadays?
With like ESQ and stuff, we normally get average like 10, 15 people through on a good day.
Yeah,
On our
okay.
Saturday mornings, that's when we get the most.
Yeah, okay. So the demand's still strong. Like I said earlier, the market's probably shifting because as new stock comes on, it impacts on what the values are. So, but I just wanted you to meet them. I knew they would hate me doing it, so I thought I'd say it.
It's a good question. Are you observing any preference of units versus houses in terms of rental?
Like in the past, it used to be affordability,
Mm.
but there's not that much gap now. So families would like houses, professional people probably go for the apartments would be my sort of estimate. But like if you get a good 4-bedroom house, you'll definitely see a lot more people. I mean, what's the most you've had turn up to a nice house?
Oh, like 30 odd people. And then we normally turn them over in a day or two for like
Yeah.
the big 4 bedrooms.
Yeah. We just got a record for Caddens, was it? So what that rent for?
1,500 a week.
1,500 a week.
How many bedrooms?
I think it was 5.
Five.
bedrooms.
With a
Still very
pool.
good.
Yeah,
Brand new?
5 beds.
1,500 weeks. It's a
Oh,
lot.
it's only a few years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful home,
Yeah,
but there's
stunning.
Still very good price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know. I know. You look at it and think you should be probably buying something if you can afford to sell it. Because that's like £6,000, so that's paying off $1 million a year or something. But don't forget, like, one of the real significant things that's going to happen in Penrith in the next year, or say 3 years, is as they start opening up the airport and all the other buildings and businesses around it, there's a lot more highly skilled, highly paid jobs that are going to be local in our area. And if your choice is to live in like Penrith, Blacktown or Liverpool, like, they're going to come to Penrith, right? So you're going to have a lot of people that are on contracts. They'll be working for a year or two, sign up and doing aeronautics or doing robotics because of all the big warehouses there. Has everyone been for a drive out along Memory Road recently? It's absolutely mind-blowing. So Amazon built the first big shed out there, which was 100,000 metres squared, and that's been dwarfed by what they're doing now. The distribution centres they're doing out there, so people are leasing like one pallet space. I think it's $4 a pallet or something. So Bunnings will get like a shipment over from China. They'll lease a certain number of pallets in this big distribution warehouse, and it's all done by robotics and computer. Like it's insane, but it's creating jobs, and you're going to see a lot of these people on contracts. So yeah, I think you'll see a lot more people looking for, and the company's paying for it. So they probably don't care about the 1,500 as much as they want some luxury, and they're probably going to have to offer it as in their package to get them to come. So I think that's one of the big changes you're going to see in our market. I can tell you now, we're seeing a very low number of investors in the buying market. Like, it's a good example. Like Solis, for example, there's 112 units and there's 24 rentals, so at 20%. Like if you go back to Home on High days, it was 40-45% were investors.
The atrium was 38 units, we had 4.
Yeah.
Or was it 38 and 4? There you go. So that's like a really, really low percentage. Even with our general like sales agent, how many investors would you see at a property, like percentage-wise?
At the moment, minimal, yeah, probably 25-30%.
Yeah, so it's been a pattern for the last, I don't know, it's probably been 4 or 5 years now, I guess. So yeah, so it's interesting to see how that all impacts on the sort of market as well. So yeah.
Is that because of the prices? So they're waiting for investors?
No, it was interest rate, like it was costs. It was just the way it got really expensive to get the finance to buy an investment property. The returns swapped around, that you weren't getting great returns. Like residential returns probably in Penrith, well, it's actually in your fact sheet, the current return, but it got down to probably about 2.5% at some point. Whereas now I think the units are in 3, I think houses are 3 and units are close to 4, I think, at the moment. And the biggest issue is the cost of living. Like insurance has gone up, everything's gone up. Like it's crazy. It's gone up for the tenants, like we pay their energy and everything. So it's been tough. So it's definitely pushed investors out of the market. So you resilient ones have done really well because you've had good capital growth as well. That's it. Sorry? I just want to make you uncomfortable for as long as all right, well please feel free to grab a drink, grab some food. Otherwise I've got to take it all home and I'm trying to... And thank you for coming, really appreciate it.